The Mafia boss froze mid-signature, his pen hovering over a contract worth millions. Across the crowded restaurant, a woman stumbled under the weight of her tray, her swollen belly unmistakable, her face pale with exhaustion. Dante Russo's world tilted on its axis. That woman was supposed to be dead to him. She'd walked away 2 years ago, claiming she loved someone else, shattering the only thing he'd ever allowed himself to care about. But here she was, pregnant, broken, and about to collapse in front of a room full of people who'd pay anything to see a Russo show weakness. If you want to see how far love and vengeance can take a man who's lost everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. Bota. The crystal chandeliers of Bella Vista cast fractured light across the faces of men who dealt in shadows. Dante Russo sat at the corner table, the power position, always, with his spine straight and his expression carved from marble. Across from him, Viktor Kozlov shuffled papers with hands that had ordered executions before breakfast. The restaurant hummed with the kind of quiet that came when people knew better than to speak too loudly. "The territory's in Brooklyn," Viktor said, his accent thick as winter. "You control distribution, I control supply. 50-50 split." Dante didn't blink. 60-40. "My people take the risk on the street." Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Men like him understood the language of leverage. Dante reached for his pen, the Mont Blanc his father had given him the day before he'd been murdered in a deal gone wrong. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to sign a contract in the same restaurant where his father had made his last deal. The weight of legacy pressed down on his shoulders as he positioned the pen above the signature line. This deal would cement his position as the most powerful man in the East Coast underworld. 20 years of blood, strategy, and ruthless calculation, all leading to this moment. Then the crash shattered everything. Porcelain exploded across marble. A woman's gasp cut through the ambient noise. Dante's hand stilled, his predator's instinct snapping his attention toward the sound before his conscious mind caught up. The tray lay in pieces. Soup pooled across the floor in an abstract pattern that would have been beautiful if it weren't so pathetic. And standing in the center of the wreckage, one hand pressed against her lower back, the other clutching her visibly pregnant belly, was a ghost. Lena. The pen slipped from Dante's fingers. She looked up, her eyes meeting his across 30 feet of expensive real estate, and the expression that crossed her face wasn't surprise. It was terror. "Dante?" Victor's voice came from far away. "We have a problem?" He couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the impossible reality standing in a cheap waitress uniform with exhaustion carved into every line of her face. Lena Hale, his ex-wife. The woman who'd ripped his heart out 2 years ago when she told him she was leaving him for another man. The woman he'd spent months searching for before finally accepting she was gone. The woman he'd taught himself to stop loving through sheer force of will and an ocean of whiskey. Pregnant. The word detonated in his mind like a grenade. She was at least 7 months along, maybe more, her belly straining against the black fabric of her uniform. Her face had the hollowed-out look of someone who wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating enough, was running on fumes and fear. "I need a moment," Dante heard himself say. His voice sounded normal, controlled. A miracle, considering his pulse was trying to jackhammer through his chest. Victor followed his gaze, his expression calculating. "Personal business?" "Something like that." "Then we continue later." Victor stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "But Dante, don't let personal complications cloud your judgment. That's how men like us end up dead." Dante didn't respond. He was already moving, his body operating on autopilot as his mind tried to catch up with reality. Lena had dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick up the broken pieces. Her hands were shaking. She didn't look up, even though he knew she felt him approaching. He'd always been able to read her tells, the way her shoulders tensed, the slight hitch in her breathing. "Leave it," he said. She flinched. Actually flinched, like his voice was a physical blow. "I said leave it." He reached down, his hand closing around her upper arm. The contact sent electricity through his nervous system. She was thinner than he remembered everywhere except her belly. "Stand up." "Mr. Russo, Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than he'd intended. He gentled his grip, helped her to her feet. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her lips were chapped from being bitten. Don't apologize. Just stand up. She swayed slightly. He steadied her automatically, his other hand coming to rest on her lower back. The swell of her pregnancy pressed against his abdomen, and something primal and possessive roared to life in his chest. Lena. Her name tasted like whiskey and regret. What the hell are you doing here? Before she could answer, a voice cut through the moment like a knife. Ms. Hale! The restaurant manager materialized from the kitchen, his face red with fury. Gerald Morrison, a pretentious ass who'd been riding his family's coattails into mediocrity for 3 generations. Dante had met him exactly once and immediately disliked him. This is the 3rd time this week, Gerald spat, advancing on Lena like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Do you have any idea how much those plates cost? That's coming out of your paycheck. Lena's face went even paler. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison. I lost my balance. You're a liability. Gerald grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. I should fire you right now. Dante moved without thinking. One moment Gerald was touching what used to be his, and the next moment the manager was stumbling backward, Dante's hand wrapped around his throat. Get your hands off her. The restaurant went silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to evaporate. Every eye in the room locked onto the tableau. Dante Russo, with his hand around Gerald Morrison's windpipe, standing between a pregnant waitress and her boss like an avenging angel. Gerald's eyes bulged. Mr. Russo, I wasn't... You weren't what? Dante's voice dropped to a whisper. The dangerous kind. The kind that preceded broken bones and shallow graves. You weren't manhandling a pregnant woman in the middle of your restaurant? Because that's exactly what I saw. She's just a waitress. She's a human being. Dante released him with enough force to send him stumbling. And if I ever see you touch her again, we're going to have a very different conversation. The kind that ends with you regretting every decision that led you to this moment. Gerald smoothed his tie with shaking hands, his face mottled with rage and humiliation. But he wasn't stupid enough to push back. Not against Dante Russo, not in a room full of witnesses who'd spread the story before dessert was served. Of course, Gerald managed. My apologies. Get out of my sight. Gerald scurried away. Dante turned back to Lena, who was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. We need to talk, he said. I can't. She stepped back, putting distance between them. I have tables. I own this restaurant. Her eyes widened. What? As of 3 weeks ago. Silent partner, 60% stake. He hadn't actually, but he would by morning. One phone call to his lawyer and Bella Vista would be his. Which means you work for me now, and I'm giving you the rest of the night off. Dante, please. Is it mine? The question hung between them like a blade. Lena's hand moved instinctively to her belly, protective, afraid. No? The lie was so obvious it would have been funny if it weren't destroying him. He could see it in her eyes, the same eyes that used to look at him with love and trust, and something that felt like home. Now they held nothing but fear. Lena, it's not yours. Her voice gained strength, even as her hands trembled. I'm sorry you had to see me like this, but the baby isn't your concern. I have to get back to work. She tried to move past him. He caught her arm again, gentler this time. You're not seriously going to stand there and tell me that's not my child. It's not. Then who's the father? Something flickered across her face. Pain. Deep, soul-crushing pain. That's none of your business. The hell it isn't. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. We were married, Lena. You were my wife, and now you show up pregnant, working yourself to death in a place like this, and you expect me to believe whatever you want. She wrenched her arm free. It doesn't change the facts. I left you. I'm with someone else. This baby isn't yours. End of story. You're lying. So what if I am? The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. What difference does it make? We're done, Dante. We've been done for 2 years. You need to let this go. I can't. You have to. Why? He was close enough now to smell her shampoo, cheap, nothing like the expensive products she used to use, and see the pulse hammering in her throat. Why did you really leave, Lena? Because I've spent 2 years trying to understand, and nothing about your story makes sense. Tears welled in her eyes. Please stop. Tell me the truth. I can't. Can't or won't. Does it matter? A single tear tracked down her cheek. Either way, the answer is the same. I'm asking you, begging you to let me go. Forget you saw me here. Forget about the baby. Just walk away. Every instinct he possessed screamed that she was hiding something. Something big. Something that explained the fear in her eyes and the lies on her tongue. But before he could push further, Lena gasped. Her hand flew to her belly, her face contorting in pain. What's wrong? Dante caught her as her knees buckled. Lena, what's happening? Nothing, she panted. Braxton Hicks, it's fine. I just need to sit down. Like hell. He swept her into his arms, ignoring her protests. She weighed almost nothing. How long had she been starving herself? I'm taking you to a hospital. No! The panic in her voice stopped him cold. No hospitals, please, Dante. I can't. They'll ask questions. What questions? What are you so afraid of? She was crying now, really crying, her body shaking with sobs. Please just put me down. I'm fine. I have to get back to work. If I lose this job, you're not going back to work. He started walking toward the exit, his decision made. And you're not losing anything. But we are going to figure out what the hell is going on. Dante, please. He pushed through the front door into the cool evening air. His car was waiting, Blacktown car, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that screamed money and power. His driver, Marcus, jumped out immediately. Hospital, Dante ordered. Now. No! Lena struggled in his arms, surprisingly strong for someone so exhausted. I'm not going to a hospital. Put me down. Put me down right now or I swear I'll scream. He froze. You'll what? I'll scream. Her eyes were wild, desperate. I'll tell everyone you're kidnapping me. I'll make a scene that'll end up on the news by morning. Is that what you want? Your name attached to some scandal about forcing your pregnant ex-wife into a car? Dante stared at her. The Lena he'd known would never have threatened him, would never have looked at him with this mix of terror and defiance. What the hell had happened to her? Fine, he said quietly. No hospital. But you're not going back in there, and you're not walking away. We're going somewhere private where you can sit down, catch your breath, and explain to me why you look like you haven't slept in a month. I don't owe you explanations. Maybe not. But you do owe that baby a mother who isn't about to collapse from exhaustion. He gentled his voice, let her see the genuine concern beneath the anger. Please, Lena, just let me help. 1 hour. That's all I'm asking. She searched his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, the fight drained out of her. 1 hour, she whispered, and then you let me go. 1 hour, he agreed. It was a lie, and they both knew it. He'd never been good at letting go of what was his, and despite everything, despite the divorce papers and the time and the lies, Lena Hale was still his. She'd always be his. He just had to figure out why she was so desperate to convince them both otherwise. Marcus opened the car door. Dante slid into the back seat with Lena still in his arms, unwilling to release her even for the second it would take to set her down. Where to, boss? Marcus asked. The penthouse. Lena stiffened. Dante? It's private. It's safe. And it has a couch where you can put your feet up while we talk. He looked down at her, at the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. When's the last time you ate? She didn't answer. When's the last time you slept more than a few hours? Still nothing. That's what I thought. He pulled out his phone, fired off a quick text to his housekeeper. Maria will have food ready when we get there. You're going to eat, you're going to rest, and then you're going to tell me the truth. And if I don't, then I'll find it out myself. He met her eyes, let her see the steel beneath the concern. You know me, Lena. You know what I'm capable of when I want answers. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but one way or another, I'm going to know why my ex-wife is working herself to death in a low-rent restaurant while pregnant with a baby she claims isn't mine. The car pulled into traffic. Through the tinted windows, the city lights blurred into streams of gold and white. Lena sagged against him, her head coming to rest on his shoulder like it used to on quiet Sunday mornings when they were still happy. You shouldn't have interfered, she said softly. You've just made everything so much worse. Worse than what? She closed her eyes. You have no idea what you've done. Then explain it to me. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Her hand found his, squeezed once. I'm sorry, Dante, for everything, but you need to stay away from me. Far away. It's the only way to keep you safe. His blood ran cold. Keep me safe from what? But she'd already retreated into silence, her body going limp with exhaustion. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into sleep. Dante held her and stared out at the city he'd conquered through blood and strategy, and tried to reconcile the terrified woman in his arms with the confident, vibrant person he'd married. What had happened to her in the 2 years since she'd left? Who had she been running from? And why the hell did she think leaving him had kept him safe? The questions multiplied as Marcus navigated through traffic toward the penthouse. Dante's mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Lena had left claiming she loved someone else, but there'd been no warmth in her voice when she'd said it. No conviction. Just resignation. Like she was reading from a script. His phone buzzed. A text from Victor. Deal's still on the table. Don't let the past interfere with the future. Dante deleted it without responding. For once in his life, a multi-million-dollar deal was the last thing on his mind. The car pulled into the underground garage of his building. Marcus killed the engine, but Dante didn't move. Lena was still asleep against his shoulder, her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been when she was awake. She looked younger like this, vulnerable, pregnant with his child. He knew it, felt it in his bones. The timing was right. They'd been together 2 years ago, right before she'd left. And despite her protests, she'd never been a good liar, not to him. Boss? Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. We're here. Give me a minute. He studied Lena's sleeping face, memorizing the changes. The faint lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. The hollowness in her cheeks. The way her lips were chapped from being bitten. Whatever had driven her away, whatever she was hiding, he'd uncover it. And then he'd destroy whoever was responsible for putting that fear in her eyes. Because despite everything, despite the divorce and the time and the lies, one truth remained. Lena Hale was his, and he protected what was his. Always. The elevator climbed 40 floors in silence. Dante held Lena against his chest, her weight barely registering, her breathing soft and even against his neck. The city spread below them through the glass walls, a constellation of light and shadow that he'd spent years learning to control. But control meant nothing when the woman in his arms had just upended every truth he'd built his life around. The doors opened directly into his penthouse. Maria stood waiting, her weathered face creased with concern the moment she saw Lena. Dios mío, she breathed. Is she all right? She's exhausted. Dante carried Lena past the foyer, through the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Did you prepare food? Soup, bread, fruit, easy things. Maria followed, her hands twisting in her apron. Mr. Russo, that girl looks half-starved. How long has she been? I don't know. He lowered Lena carefully onto the leather couch, the same one where they used to watch old movies on Sunday afternoons, her hair spread across the cushions like dark water. But I'm going to find out. Maria disappeared into the kitchen. Dante knelt beside the couch, studying Lena's face in the soft lamplight. 2 years. 2 years of believing she'd chosen someone else, that she'd simply stopped loving him. 2 years of teaching himself not to care, not to search, not to hope. All lies. He could see it now with her defenses down, the way her brow furrowed even in sleep, like her dreams weren't offering any escape, the protective curve of her hand over her belly, the faint bruises on her wrist where Gerald had grabbed her, marks that made his blood sing with violence. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, keeping his voice low. What? It's me. Tommy Castellano, his right hand, his oldest friend. Victor's people are asking questions about what happened at Bella Vista. Word spreading that you threatened Morrison over a waitress. Let it spread. Dante, we can't afford... I said let it spread. He stood, pacing toward the windows. And I need you to do something for me. Find out everything about Lena Hale's movements for the past 2 years. Where she's been living, who she's been seeing, what she's been doing. A pause. Your ex-wife? Just do it. Boss, if she walked away, she didn't. Dante's reflection stared back at him from the glass. A man who'd built an empire on reading people, on seeing through deception. She ran. There's a difference. You want me to dig up the reason why? No. I want you to dig up who made her run. His voice dropped to something colder. And then I want their names, their addresses, and a full accounting of every move they've made in the past 24 months. Jesus, Dante. You sure you want to go down this road? Was he? Opening this door meant confronting truths he'd buried. It meant acknowledging that the past 2 years had been built on a foundation of lies. It meant accepting that Lena might have had a reason, a real reason, for destroying them both. Behind him, Lena stirred. A small sound escaped her lips, somewhere between a whimper and a protest. Yeah, Dante said. I'm sure. Call me when you have something. He hung up and returned to the couch. Lena's eyes were open now, confusion clouding them as she took in her surroundings. Where? She started to sit up, then froze when she saw him. The penthouse. You fell asleep in the car. You should have woken me up. She pushed herself upright, wincing slightly. I need to go. You need to eat. Dante. 1 hour. That was the deal. He settled into the chair across from her, maintaining distance. And you've been asleep for 20 minutes, which means you still owe me 40. Her jaw tightened. You can't keep me here. I'm not keeping you anywhere. You're free to leave. He gestured toward the elevator. But we both know you won't make it down 40 floors before you collapse again. So you can stay, eat something, rest for another 20 minutes, and then I'll have Marcus drive you wherever you want to go. Or you can be stubborn, pass out in the elevator, and wake up in a hospital anyway. She hated him in that moment. He could see it in the flash of her eyes, the set of her mouth. But she also knew he was right. Fine. She sank back against the cushions. 20 minutes. Maria appeared with a tray, chicken soup that smelled like comfort, fresh bread still warm from the oven, sliced fruit arranged with care. She set it on the coffee table, gave Lena a gentle smile, and disappeared without a word. Lena stared at the food like it was a trap. When's the last time you ate? Dante asked again. This morning. Try again. Her hands fisted in her lap. Yesterday morning. And before that? I don't remember. She looked away. It's hard to keep track. It's hard to afford food, you mean? He watched her carefully. How long have you been working at Bella Vista? 3 weeks. And before that? A diner in Queens. Before that, a coffee shop in Brooklyn. She met his eyes, defiance creeping back into her voice. What do you want me to say? That I've been struggling? Fine. I've been struggling. Happy? No. He leaned forward. I want you to tell me why. Because life is expensive and jobs are hard. Bullshit. The word cut through her explanation. You had access to our joint accounts. I never touched them after you left. There's over $2 million sitting there, and you're working yourself to death for minimum wage? Something flickered across her face. Fear, again. Always fear. I couldn't touch that money. Why not? Because I couldn't. She reached for the soup with shaking hands, lifted the spoon to her lips. The first taste made her eyes close, like it was the best thing she'd experienced in months. Probably was. Eat slowly, Dante said. You'll make yourself sick. She ignored him, taking another spoonful, then another. He watched her devour half the bowl before his words registered, and she forced herself to slow down. The baby's mine, he said quietly. Her spoon clattered against the bowl. No. Yes. Dante, I told you. You told me lies. He kept his voice level, non-threatening. The timing's right. 7 months, maybe 8, which puts conception right around when you left. And before you feed me another story about being with someone else, we both know you're not that good a liar. Tears welled in her eyes. Please stop. Tell me the truth. I can't. Why? He moved to the couch, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. What are you so afraid of? Everything. The word burst out of her. I'm afraid of everything, okay? I'm afraid of losing this baby. I'm afraid of not having enough money for rent. I'm afraid of working so hard I go into early labor. I'm afraid of... She cut herself off, pressing her lips together. Afraid of what, Lena? She shook her head, mute. Afraid of me? No. The answer came fast, instinctive. Never you. Then what? She set down the soup, her hands trembling too hard to hold it. If I tell you, you'll try to fix it. You'll go after people who are too dangerous even for you. And then, her voice broke. Then you'll get hurt, or worse. And I can't live with that, Dante. I can't. His blood ran cold. Who threatened you? No one. Don't lie to me, not about this. He caught her chin gently, forced her to meet his eyes. Someone got to you. Someone made you leave. Who was it? Tears streaked down her face. It doesn't matter anymore. The hell it doesn't. They're too powerful. Even you. She choked on a sob. Even you can't touch them. Try me. No. She pulled away from his touch. I won't be responsible for your death. I won't let this baby grow up knowing that their father died because of me. The admission hung in the air between them. Dante's heart slammed against his ribs. So it is mine. Lena closed her eyes. I didn't say that. You just did. He wanted to pull her close, to feel the proof of his child between them, but he held himself still, knowing she'd bolt if he moved too fast. Lena, look at me. She did, reluctantly. I've survived 20 years in this life, he said. I've made enemies of men who would make your worst nightmares look like fairy tales. And I'm still here, still standing, because I'm very good at what I do, and I'm very hard to kill. He touched her cheek, felt her lean into his palm before catching herself. Whatever you're afraid of, we'll face it together. You don't understand. Then help me understand. For a moment he thought she might. Her lips parted, words forming. But then her gaze caught on something over his shoulder, the window, the city beyond, and terror washed across her face. I have to go. She stood abruptly, swaying. Right now, I can't be here. Lena, they could be watching. They could see. She was breathing too fast, panic taking over. Oh God, what was I thinking? Coming here was a mistake. Being seen with you was a mistake. I've made everything worse. No one's watching. He stood, blocking her path to the elevator. My building's secure. Military-grade security systems, armed guards, the works. No one knows you're here except Maria and Marcus, and they'd die before betraying me. You don't know that. I do. You don't know them. Her voice rose, shrill with fear. You don't know what they're capable of, the things they've done, the people they've hurt. Then tell me who they are. I can't. Lena, no. She tried to push past him. I need to leave, now, before they... She never finished the sentence. Her face went white, her hand flying to her belly. The gasp that escaped her lips was pure agony. Dante caught her before she hit the floor. What's wrong? He lowered them both to the ground, cradling her against his chest. Talk to me. Is it the baby? Contraction, she panted. Just a contraction. It'll pass. You're only 7 months. 8. She gritted her teeth. Almost 8. That's still too early. Fear clawed at him, cold and vicious. We need to get you to a hospital. No hospitals. Her fingers dug into his arm. They check records. They ask questions. They'll find me. I don't give a damn who finds you. Dante, please. She looked up at him, and the raw terror in her eyes stopped his words. If you ever loved me, if you ever cared at all, please don't take me to a hospital. I'm begging you. The contraction eased. He felt it in the way her body unclenched, the way her breathing slowed. But the fear didn't leave her eyes. How often are you getting these? He asked. A few times a day? More when I'm stressed. Jesus Christ, Lena. He stood, bringing her with him, and carried her back to the couch. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to kill that baby. I know. Her voice was small, defeated. I know, but I don't have a choice. I have to keep working. I have to pay rent. I have to stay hidden. Hidden from who? She turned her face away. Dante pulled out his phone, dialed Tommy again. I need a doctor, private, discreet, someone who won't ask questions or file reports. How discreet are we talking? The kind who treats gunshot wounds and doesn't remember faces. Give me 20 minutes, Tommy paused. Should I be worried? Just get me the doctor. He hung up and found Lena watching him. I told you no hospitals, she said, and I listened. This is a private doctor who'll come here. No records, no questions. He'll check you and the baby, make sure everything's okay, and then disappear. That's the compromise. She wanted to argue. He could see it in the set of her jaw. But another cramp rippled across her belly, visible through her thin uniform, and the fight drained out of her. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The next 20 minutes crawled by. Dante convinced Lena to finish the soup, to eat some bread, to drink water. She complied mechanically, her mind clearly elsewhere. He wanted to press her for answers, to demand the names of whoever had terrorized her into this half-life, but he could see how close she was to breaking, and pushing now would only drive her further away. So he waited, and planned, and let the cold fury building in his chest calcify into something harder, sharper. When the elevator chimed, Lena flinched. Dante laid a hand on her shoulder. It's just the doctor. Dr. Raymond Chen was exactly what Dante had expected. 50s, calm demeanor, the kind of face that had seen everything and judged nothing. He carried a medical bag that had seen better days and nodded at Dante without surprise. Mr. Russo. Doctor, thank you for coming. Always happy to help. Dr. Chen's gaze moved to Lena, and his expression softened. Hello, miss. I'm told you've been having some contractions? Lena nodded, mute. Well, let's take a look and see what's going on. He moved toward her with practiced ease. How far along are you? 32 weeks? And when did the contractions start? A few weeks ago, but they've gotten worse. Dr. Chen hummed thoughtfully as he pulled out his equipment. Any bleeding? No. Dizziness? Headaches? Sometimes. When's the last time you saw an OB? Lena bit her lip. 5 months ago. The doctor's expression didn't change, but Dante saw the concern flicker across his face. I see. Well, let's get your blood pressure first. The examination took 15 minutes. Dante stood by the windows, giving Lena space but refusing to leave entirely. He watched Dr. Chen check her vitals, palpate her belly, listen to the baby's heartbeat through a device that made it sound like galloping horses. His child, his son or daughter, fighting to survive inside a mother who was slowly killing herself through fear and deprivation. Everything looks okay for now, Dr. Chen said finally. Baby's heartbeat is strong, position is good, but he fixed Lena with a stern look. Your blood pressure is too high. You're underweight for this stage of pregnancy. And these contractions are stress-induced. If you don't slow down, you're going to go into premature labor. I can't slow down, Lena said. Then you'll end up in a hospital whether you want to or not. And at 32 weeks, that baby's going to need intensive care. He packed up his equipment. You need bed rest, real rest, good food, less stress. Otherwise, you're playing Russian roulette with your child's life. Silence fell. Dante watched Lena's face crumple, watched her hands shake as they covered her belly. I'll make sure she rests, he said. Both Lena and Dr. Chen looked at him. Mr. Russo, the doctor began. She's staying here, effective immediately. Dante's tone left no room for argument. Maria will make sure she eats. I'll make sure she rests. And you'll come back in 3 days to check on her again. Dante, no, Lena protested. I can't stay here. You don't understand. You're right. I don't understand. Because you won't tell me. He moved toward her, knelt so they were eye level. But I understand this. That's my child. And I'm not going to stand by while you work yourself to death trying to protect me from something I can handle. You can't. Yes, I can. Whatever it is, whoever they are, I can handle it. He took her hand, felt how cold her fingers were. But only if you trust me. Only if you let me help. Tears streamed down her face. If I stay, if they find out, they won't. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. This building is a fortress. No one gets in without my permission. No one gets out without me knowing. You'll be safe here. But you won't be. Her voice broke. Don't you get it? Being near me puts a target on your back. Sweetheart, I've had a target on my back since the day I was born. He wiped away her tears with his thumb. One more doesn't scare me. It should. But it doesn't. He stood, addressed the doctor. What does she need? Vitamins? Supplements? Special food? Dr. Chen rattled off a list. Dante committed it to memory, already planning who to call, where to get everything, how to make sure Lena had access to the best care money could buy without leaving a paper trail that could be followed. And one more thing, the doctor added. She needs calm, no stress, no drama. Just peace and quiet. Dante almost laughed. Peace and quiet. In his world. With whoever was hunting Lena still out there. But he nodded anyway. She'll have it. After Dr. Chen left, Lena sat on the couch looking small and lost. Dante poured her a glass of water, made her drink it. I should go, she said without conviction. You should stay. Dante, one night, just stay one night. Get some real sleep in a real bed. Let your body rest. In the morning, if you still want to leave, I'll have Marcus drive you wherever you want. He paused. But I'm hoping you won't want to leave. She looked up at him, conflict written across every feature. This is a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. You're so stubborn. You used to love that about me. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I used to love a lot of things about you. Used to? The smile faded. I still do. That's the problem. The admission hung between them, fragile and true. Dante wanted to push, to ask what she meant, to demand answers to the 1,000 questions burning through him. But he could see how exhausted she was, how close to collapse. Come on, he said gently. Let me show you to a room. She let him help her up, let him guide her down the hall to one of the guest bedrooms. Maria had already prepared it, fresh sheets, soft pillows, a glass of water on the nightstand. There's a bathroom through there, Dante said, pointing. Towels in the closet. Maria left some clothes for you on the bed. They should fit. Lena touched the silk pajamas with trembling fingers. She didn't have to. She wanted to. He moved toward the door, giving her space. I'm right down the hall if you need anything. Anything at all. Dante? He turned back. Thank you, she said softly. For tonight. For caring. For not... She swallowed hard. For not hating me. I could never hate you. You should. Well, I don't, so you're stuck with that. He gripped the door frame, torn between leaving and staying. Get some sleep, Lena. We'll figure everything else out tomorrow. He closed the door and stood in the hallway, listening to the soft sounds of her moving around the room. Every instinct screamed at him to burst back in there, to demand the truth, to shake it out of her if necessary. But he'd learned patience in this business. Learned that sometimes the best way to get what you wanted was to wait for the right moment to strike. So he pulled out his phone and texted Tommy. Move up the timeline. I need everything by morning. That's impossible, Tommy replied. Make it possible. He walked back to the living room, poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, and stared out at the city. Somewhere out there, someone had terrorized Lena into running. Someone had made her believe that loving him was a death sentence. Someone had spent 2 years thinking they'd won. They were about to learn otherwise, because Dante Russo had just gotten his wife back, and heaven help whoever tried to take her away again. Dawn broke over the city in shades of gold and amber, but Dante hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his office, surrounded by files and photographs that Tommy's people had rushed to compile. What they'd uncovered made his blood run cold. The knock on his door came at 6:30. Tommy walked in looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. You're not going to like this, Tommy said without preamble. Tell me anyway. Tommy dropped a thick folder on the desk. Lena didn't just disappear. She was erased. Someone with serious resources scrubbed her from every database they could reach. No credit cards. No bank accounts. No medical records after she left you. It's like she became a ghost. Dante flipped open the folder. The first photograph showed Lena walking out of a bank 2 years ago, her face pale, her hands clutching an envelope. The timestamp read 3 days after she'd left him. She withdrew $50,000 in cash from your joint account, Tommy continued. That's the last transaction she ever made under her real name. After that, nothing. No paper trail, no digital footprint. She's been living off cash, working under the table, staying completely off the grid. Someone taught her how to disappear. Yeah, someone professional. Tommy pulled out another photograph. But they weren't perfect. We found this from a traffic camera 6 months ago. Dante studied the image. Lena, visibly pregnant, standing on a street corner in Queens. And behind her, barely visible in the frame, a black sedan with tinted windows. That car followed her for 3 blocks, Tommy said, then lost her when she ducked into a subway station. But here's the interesting part. We ran the plates. They're registered to a shell corporation, and that shell corporation is owned by another shell corporation, and that one leads back to... He paused, his expression grim. Dante, you need to prepare yourself for this. Just say it. Vincent Calabrese. The name hit like a bullet. Dante's hand tightened on the photograph, crumpling it. That's impossible, he said. Calabrese has been dead for 18 months. His organization isn't. His son took over. Antonio Calabrese. Tommy pulled out another file. And Antonio's got a reputation for finishing what his father started, including old grudges. Dante's mind raced backward, assembling pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed. Vincent Calabrese had been a rival boss, old school, vicious, with a network that stretched into every corrupt corner of the city. They'd clashed repeatedly over territory, over deals, over the kind of disrespect that got men killed in this business. But Vincent had died of a heart attack, natural causes. Dante had gone to the funeral, had paid his respects to the widow, had even sent a tasteful flower arrangement. The Calabrese family had seemed to retreat after that, consolidating power quietly while Dante expanded his own empire. Why would Antonio come after Lena? Dante asked. What's the connection? We're still digging, but I think... Tommy hesitated. I think Vincent might have been planning something before he died. Something big. And somehow Lena got caught in the middle of it. That doesn't make sense. She had nothing to do with my business. I kept her completely separate. Oh, maybe that's exactly why they targeted her. Tommy met his eyes. Think about it, Dante. Everyone knew she was your weakness. The one thing that could make you vulnerable. If Vincent wanted to destroy you, really destroy you, going after Lena would be the smartest play. The words settled over him like ash. He'd spent years building walls around his personal life, keeping Lena safe from his world. But in doing so, he'd made her the most obvious target. Do we know where Antonio is now? Dante asked. He's been quiet, too quiet. No one's seen him in weeks. Tommy shifted uncomfortably. Boss, there's something else. About 2 years ago, right before Lena left you, there were rumors. Whispers that Vincent had leverage on someone close to you. Something big enough to make them betray you. And you think that someone was Lena. I think they made her believe she had no choice. Dante stood, paced to the window. The city was waking up below, cars filling streets, people rushing to jobs and lives that didn't include fear of assassination or betrayal. Normal lives. The kind of life he'd wanted to give Lena before everything went to hell. What kind of leverage? He asked quietly. We don't know yet, but whatever it was bad enough to make her run. Bad enough to keep her running for 2 years. Tommy paused. Bad enough to make her think you were safer without her. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. Lena hadn't left because she stopped loving him. She'd left because someone had convinced her that staying would get him killed. And she'd spent 2 years living in poverty and fear, sacrificing everything to keep him safe. Find Antonio, Dante said. I don't care what it costs or who you have to lean on. Find him, and find out exactly what he knows about Lena. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to my wife. Tommy left. Dante remained by this window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in colors that reminded him of better times. Times when Lena would wake up beside him, her hair a mess, her smile sleepy and real. Times when he'd believed love was enough to protect what mattered. He'd been wrong. Love wasn't enough, but power was. And he had plenty of that. The penthouse was quiet when he walked to Lena's room. He knocked softly, got no answer. When he opened the door, he found her still asleep, curled on her side with one hand tucked under her cheek and the other resting on her belly. The morning light caught in her hair, made her skin glow. She looked peaceful, safe. The sight of her like this, vulnerable, trusting, in his home where he could protect her, made something fierce and possessive surge through his chest. He backed out silently, closed the door, and found Maria in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Let her sleep, he told her. When she wakes up, make sure she eats. Everything the doctor recommended. Of course. Maria studied him with knowing eyes. You found something. It wasn't a question. Maria had been with him since he was 16, had watched him build his empire from nothing. She knew him too well. Yeah, he said. I found something. Will it bring trouble? It already has. He accepted the coffee she poured him. But I'm going to end it. Be careful, mijo. Revenge has a way of consuming everything. This isn't revenge. This is protection. Maria touched his cheek gently. Sometimes they're the same thing. He spent the next 3 hours in his office, making calls, moving pieces on a chessboard only he could see. By 10 o'clock, he had teams tracking Antonio's last known associates, had hackers pulling financial records, had every resource at his disposal focused on one goal, finding the man who'd terrorized Lena. When she finally emerged from the guest room, she looked better than she had the night before. Rested. The dark circles under her eyes had faded slightly, and there was color in her cheeks. Good morning, he said from where he sat on the couch, pretending to read the newspaper he'd stopped processing 20 minutes ago. Morning. She hovered in the doorway, uncertain. I should probably go. Have breakfast first. Dante. Please. He set down the paper. Just breakfast. Then we'll talk. She hesitated, then nodded. Maria appeared almost immediately with a tray, eggs, toast, fruit, orange juice. Lena sat at the dining table and ate slowly, properly, like someone who'd finally remembered they were allowed to be hungry. Dante watched her from the couch, content for the moment to simply know she was safe, that she was eating, that their child was getting the nourishment it needed. When she finished, she looked up at him. Thank you, she said, for last night, for breakfast, for all of it. You don't need to thank me. I do. You didn't have to do any of this. Yes, I did. He stood, moved to sit across from her at the table. Lena, I know about the Calabreses. Her face went white. The glass of orange juice slipped from her fingers, would have shattered on the floor if he hadn't caught it. How? Her voice was barely a whisper. How did you find out? I have resources. People who are very good at uncovering secrets. He kept his tone gentle, non-threatening. Vincent Calabrese came after you 2 years ago. He threatened you, gave you some kind of ultimatum that made you think you had to leave me. Tears welled in her eyes. You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have. Now they'll know. They'll know I told you. You didn't tell me anything. I figured it out myself. He reached across the table, caught her hand. And it doesn't matter if they know. What matters is that you're safe now. I'm not safe. I'll never be safe. She tried to pull away, but he held firm. Vincent's dead, but Antonio isn't, and Antonio's worse. He's smarter, meaner, more patient. He won't stop until... She choked on the words. Until what? Until he's destroyed everything Vincent wanted to destroy, including you. Then tell me what happened. Tell me everything so I can stop him. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. If I tell you, you'll go after him, and he's ready for that. He's been ready for 2 years. Going after him is exactly what he wants. I don't care what he wants. Well, I do. Her voice rose, sharp with desperation. Because I've spent 2 years keeping you alive, Dante. 2 years living in hell, working myself to death, hiding from shadows, all so you could live. And I am not going to let you throw that away because you're too stubborn to accept that some battles can't be won. Every battle can be won if you're willing to pay the price. Not this one. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Vincent Calabrese didn't just threaten me. He showed me proof. Photographs, recordings, documents. He'd spent months studying you, finding your weaknesses, mapping out every person you cared about. He knew where Maria's daughter lived. He knew Tommy's route to work. He knew the name of every business associate, every ally, every single person who mattered to you. Dante's jaw tightened. And then he told you what he'd do to them if you didn't leave. Not just what he'd do, what he'd already started doing. She turned to face him, her expression haunted. 3 days before I left, one of your suppliers was killed in a hit and run. Do you remember? Miguel Herrera. He did remember. Miguel had been a good man, reliable, with a wife and 2 kids. The police had ruled it an accident. That wasn't an accident, Lena continued. That was Vincent sending a message, showing me what would happen if I didn't cooperate. And he promised that Miguel was just the beginning. That if I stayed with you, if I told you what was happening, he'd kill everyone. Maria, Tommy, your cousin in Boston, the waitress at the coffee shop you went to every Tuesday. Everyone, one by one, until you were completely alone. The horror of it settled over Dante like a shroud. So you left. So I left. I made up a story about meeting someone else, about not loving you anymore. I made it convincing enough that you'd hate me, that you'd let me go. Her voice broke. And it worked. You stopped looking for me after 6 months. Vincent watched you move on with your life, and I really thought it was over. But it wasn't. No, because Vincent died, and Antonio took over. And Antonio decided to finish what his father started. She wrapped her arms around herself. About 8 months ago, I got a phone call. No name, just a voice telling me that Antonio knew where I was, that he knew about the baby, and that if I contacted you, if I came anywhere near you, he'd kill our child before it was even born. Dante stood slowly, violence singing through his veins. He threatened our baby. He promised. He sent me photographs of myself at the grocery store, at the laundromat, walking to work. Proof that he could get to me anytime he wanted. And the message was clear: stay away from Dante Russo or the baby dies. That's why you've been hiding. Why you wouldn't go to a hospital. Why you looked so terrified last night. I thought he had people watching Bella Vista. I thought, when you confronted me in front of everyone, when you carried me out of there, I was sure he'd know. I was sure he'd follow through on his threat. She laughed bitterly. But maybe he's just waiting. Maybe this is all part of his plan. Get us back together, make you care again, and then… She couldn't finish. Dante crossed to her, pulled her into his arms despite her weak protests. She collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. I tried so hard, she choked out. I tried to keep you safe. I tried to do everything right, but I couldn't. I couldn't keep living like that. Working all the time, never sleeping, so scared and alone. And then last night when I saw you, when you looked at me like you still cared, I just couldn't pretend anymore. You don't have to pretend. He held her tighter, his mind already working through scenarios, strategies, ways to end this nightmare. And you don't have to be scared, not anymore. Dante, you're not listening. No, you're not listening. He pulled back enough to look at her. Vincent Calabrese was a smart man. He knew exactly how to manipulate you, how to make you believe you had no choice. But he made one critical mistake. What? He underestimated how far I'd go to protect what's mine. His voice dropped to something cold and deadly. And his son is about to learn the same lesson. You can't go after Antonio. That's what he wants. He's been planning for it, preparing. Let him prepare. I've been in this business my entire life, Lena. I know how men like Antonio think. They rely on fear, on manipulation, on making their enemies too terrified to fight back. But I'm not afraid, and I'm done playing by their rules. You'll get yourself killed, or I'll kill them first. He touched her face, made her meet his eyes. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? I've never stopped trusting you. That's not the problem. Then what is? I can't lose you. The words came out raw, desperate. I can't bring a baby into this world knowing that their father died because of me. I can't live with that, Dante. I won't survive it. You won't have to, because I'm not going to die. He kissed her forehead. But I am going to end this. Today. What are you going to do? Whatever it takes. His phone buzzed before she could respond. Tommy's name flashed on the screen. Dante answered, keeping Lena close. Talk to me. We found him, Tommy said. Antonio's holed up in a warehouse in Red Hook. He's got maybe a dozen men with him, but they're not expecting trouble. Looks like he thinks he's untouchable. He's wrong. Gather everyone. Full tactical gear. I want this handled quietly. No police involvement, no witnesses. Boss, are you sure about this? If we hit him now is perfect. He thinks Lena's still too scared to talk. Thinks I still don't know what he's done. The element of surprise is ours. Dante glanced at Lena, saw the terror in her eyes. And Tommy, make sure we take him alive. I have questions before he dies. Understood. We move in 1 hour. Dante hung up. Lena was staring at him like he'd just announced the apocalypse. You're going to kill Antonio Calabrese, she said. Yes. Today. Yes. Just like that. Just like that. He cupped her face in his hands. He threatened you. He threatened our child. He's terrorized you for 2 years. That's not something I forgive. Dante, do you remember what I told you on our wedding day? He didn't wait for her to answer. I told you that anyone who hurt you would answer to me, that as long as I was breathing, no one would make you afraid. I meant that then, and I mean it now. But the risk? There's always risk. But the alternative is living the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for Antonio to make his move. That's not a life. That's a prison. He kissed her gently. I'm going to set us free. She searched his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. Promise me you'll come back. I will always come back to you. He pulled her close again, breathing in her scent, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. But I need you to promise me something too. What? Stay here. Don't leave this penthouse. Don't answer the door for anyone except Maria or Marcus. And if something goes wrong, if you don't hear from me in 6 hours, there's a safe in my office. The combination is your birthday. Inside is enough money to disappear, new identification papers, everything you need to start over somewhere safe. Dante, stop. You're scaring me. Good. Be scared. Be careful. But trust that I know what I'm doing. He kissed her again, harder this time. I'm going to fix this, Lena. I'm going to make it so you never have to be afraid again. I love you, she whispered. I never stopped loving you. I know. I never stopped either. He forced himself to let go of her, to walk away before he changed his mind. At the door, he turned back. When I come back, he said, we're going to talk about the future, about us, about raising this baby together. What if there is no future? Then I'll die knowing I fought for it. He smiled grimly, but I'm not planning on dying today. An hour later, Dante stood in the back of an unmarked van with Tommy and 15 of his most trusted men. They were all armed, all lethal, all absolutely loyal, the kind of men who understood that some problems required permanent solutions. Everyone clear on the plan? Dante asked. Nods all around. We go in quiet, secure the building, find Antonio, and bring him to me. Anyone who fights back, put them down. Anyone who runs, let them go. We're not here for foot soldiers, just Antonio. What about collateral damage? One of the men asked. Minimize it. But if it comes down to civilians or us, choose us. Dante checked his weapon, a Glock 19, well-maintained, familiar weight in his hand. This ends today, whatever it takes. The van rolled to a stop 3 blocks from the warehouse. They exited in silence, moving through the industrial district like shadows. Dante had studied this building's layout. 2 entrances, minimal security, an arrogance that came from thinking you were untouchable. Antonio was about to learn otherwise. They breached both entrances simultaneously. The men inside barely had time to reach for weapons before Dante's team took them down. Quick, efficient, brutal. No mercy. No hesitation. Dante moved through the chaos with singular focus, following Tommy toward the back office where intelligence said Antonio would be. They found him sitting behind a desk, smoking a cigarette, looking annoyed rather than afraid. Dante Russo, Antonio said, not bothering to stand. I wondered when you'd figure it out. On your feet. Or what? You'll shoot me in my own warehouse? Antonio smiled. We both know you need information more than you need revenge. You're right. Dante nodded to Tommy, who yanked Antonio out of the chair and forced him to his knees. So talk. Tell me everything about why you targeted Lena. Every detail, every plan, everything your father started and you continued. Antonio spat blood. Go to hell. Already been there. It looked a lot like the past 2 years. Dante pressed the gun to Antonio's temple. Last chance. Start talking or start praying. For the first time, fear flickered in Antonio's eyes. And then, slowly, he started to speak. Antonio's words came out between gasps of pain and defiance. Each sentence another piece of a puzzle that had cost Dante 2 years of his life. The warehouse walls seemed to close in as the truth spilled out like poison. My father hated you, Antonio said, blood trickling from his split lip. Not because of territory or money. Because you reminded him of everything he used to be before age made him weak. He saw you taking over the city, building power he couldn't touch, and it ate him alive. So he went after my wife. He went after your weakness. Antonio laughed bitterly. Everyone knew Lena was the only thing you actually cared about. Vincent watched you for months, studying her routine, her friends, the places she went. He found out she volunteered at a women's shelter in Brooklyn. Did you know that? Dante's jaw tightened. He hadn't known. Lena had kept that part of her life private, sacred. One more thing he'd failed to protect. There was a woman at the shelter, Antonio continued. Sarah Martinez. She had a 5-year-old daughter. Her ex-husband was connected to some of Vincent's people, low-level enforcer who got himself killed in a deal gone bad. Sarah testified against the guys who did it, put 2 of Vincent's men away for 20 years. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Your father used her as leverage, Dante said. Better than that. He had her killed. Made it look like the ex-husband's old crew finally got revenge. Sarah and her daughter both. Antonio met Dante's eyes with something like satisfaction. And then he showed Lena the crime scene photos. Told her that's what happened to people who got in his way. That if she didn't leave you, everyone she cared about would end up the same way. Rage flooded through Dante, hot and blinding. His finger tightened on the trigger. But that wasn't enough for him. Antonio continued quickly, seeing death in Dante's eyes. He wanted to destroy you completely. So he told Lena that he had evidence connecting you to Sarah's murder. Fake evidence, but convincing. Enough to send you to prison for life if it ever went public. That's impossible. I had nothing to do with... Doesn't matter. Vincent was good at manufacturing truth. He had photographs doctored to show your car near the crime scene. He had testimony from witnesses who'd swear they saw you there. He even had a murder weapon with your fingerprints on it, lifted from a glass you'd used at some restaurant months earlier. Antonio spat blood. He told Lena she had 2 choices. Leave you and stay silent, or watch you rot in prison while everyone she loved died. So she left. The warehouse went silent except for Dante's ragged breathing. 2 years. 2 years of believing Lena had betrayed him, when all along she'd been protecting him, sacrificing herself to keep him alive and free. And when your father died? Dante asked, his voice deadly calm. I inherited his obsession along with his empire. Antonio shrugged as much as he could with Tommy's hands on his shoulders. But I'm smarter than he was. I didn't want to just destroy you. I wanted to watch you suffer first. So I let Lena think she was safe for a while. Let her believe that leaving you had actually worked. And then, when she was pregnant, when she was at her most vulnerable, I reminded her that I could take everything away at any moment. You threatened my child. I promised her I'd kill it before it took its first breath. Antonio smiled through broken teeth. And I would have. Still will, if you pull that trigger. I've got men watching your building right now. 1 phone call from me and they stormed that penthouse. So go ahead, Dante. Shoot me. See what happens to your wife and baby when you do. Dante lowered the gun slightly, his mind calculating. Antonio was lying. He had to be. The penthouse was secure, impenetrable. But what if he wasn't? What if there was even a chance that pulling this trigger would endanger Lena? Tommy leaned in close. It's a bluff, boss. We swept the area before we came. There's nobody watching your building. You sure about that? Antonio asked. Because I saw the security footage. Saw Lena arrive last night. Saw her go inside and not come out. And my men know that if they don't hear from me and... He checked his watch. 30 minutes. They're authorized to move. He's stalling, Tommy said. Playing for time. Dante studied Antonio's face, reading the truth beneath the bravado. Tommy was right. This was desperation, not confidence. But even a small risk was too much when Lena's life hung in the balance. Make the call, Dante ordered Tommy. Have our people do another sweep of the building. I want confirmation that there's no threat before we proceed. Boss, now! Tommy stepped away, phone pressed to his ear. Dante kept his gun trained on Antonio, watching the man's expression for any tell that would reveal the truth. But Antonio had learned his father's lessons well. He kept his face carefully neutral, giving nothing away. The minutes crawled by. Finally, Tommy returned. All clear, he said. No suspicious activity within 3 blocks of your building. If he had men there, they're ghosts. Relief and fury warred inside Dante's chest. You were bluffing. Was I? Antonio's smile widened. Or did my men just leave after seeing your security sweep? Guess you'll never know for sure. Dante pressed the gun to Antonio's forehead. Give me one reason why I shouldn't end you right now. Because killing me won't solve your problem. Antonio's voice steadied, gaining strength. My father kept detailed records. Everything he had on you, the fake evidence, the witness statements, the photographs. It's all stored somewhere safe. And if anything happens to me, those files get released to the FBI, the media, every law enforcement agency that would love to take down Dante Russo. You're lying. Am I? You willing to bet your freedom on it? Your ability to protect Lena and that baby? Antonio leaned forward despite the gun. Here's the truth, Russo. You can't win this. You kill me, you go to prison. You let me live, I keep coming after everything you love. Either way, my father's revenge plays out exactly like he planned. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath. Dante's men watched him, waiting for orders. Tommy stood ready to act on whatever decision came next, and Antonio knelt there with victory gleaming in his eyes, certain he'd trapped Dante in an impossible choice. But Dante hadn't survived 20 years in this business by accepting impossible choices. He'd survived by finding third options that no one else could see. You're right about one thing, Dante said quietly. Killing you won't solve my problem, but it will make me feel better. He pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Antonio's body jerked backward, a perfect hole between his eyes, the smile frozen on his face. He crumpled to the concrete, dead, before he hit the ground. Boss, Tommy grabbed Dante's arm. What about the files, the evidence he claimed to have? There are no files. Dante holstered his weapon, his hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Vincent Calabrese died of a heart attack 18 months ago. If he'd really had that kind of leverage, he would have used it before he died, would have given it to Antonio as insurance. But he didn't, because it never existed. The whole thing was a bluff built on trauma and fear. How do you know? Because men like Vincent don't wait. They don't plan for 18 months and then die before seeing their revenge through. He threatened Lena to make her leave, but he never had the ammunition to actually destroy me. Just smoke and mirrors designed to terrify a woman who loved me enough to believe she was protecting me by walking away. Tommy stared at him. That's a hell of a gamble. It's the only one that makes sense. Dante looked down at Antonio's body, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. And even if I'm wrong, even if those files exist somewhere, I'll handle it. But I'm not letting the ghost of Vincent Calabrese control my life anymore. And I'm sure as hell not letting his son threaten my family. So what now? Now we clean this up. Make it look like Antonio got caught in a power struggle with his own people. There'll be questions, but nothing that leads back to us. Dante started walking toward the exit. And then I go home to my wife. The sun was setting by the time Dante's car pulled into the underground garage. He'd showered and changed at a safe house, erasing any evidence of the warehouse. But he could still feel the weight of what he'd done pressing down on his shoulders. He'd killed Antonio Calabrese in cold blood. No trial, no mercy, no hesitation, just execution. And he didn't regret it. Couldn't regret it. Not when it meant Lena and their child were finally safe. But that didn't mean there wouldn't be consequences. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, he found Lena pacing in the living room, her face pale with worry. "You're back," she breathed, rushing toward him. "I was so scared. You've been gone for hours and I didn't know if—" She stopped, studying his face. "What happened?" "It's over." "What do you mean, it's over?" "I mean, Antonio Calabrese is dead. His organization will tear itself apart fighting for control, but they won't come after you. They won't threaten our baby. It's over." He pulled her into his arms, felt her trembling against him. "You're safe now." She pushed back, searching his eyes. "You killed him?" "Yes." Just like that. Just like that. He wouldn't lie to her, wouldn't diminish what he'd done. "He spent 2 years terrorizing you. He threatened our child. And he would have kept coming, kept hurting you until one of us was dead. So I made sure it was him." Tears streamed down her face. "What if there are consequences? What if his people come after you?" Let them try. He wiped her tears away with his thumbs. I've been in this business long enough to know how to cover my tracks. And even if they do come, even if there's blowback, I'll handle it, because keeping you safe is worth any price. Dante, you can't just kill people and expect everything to be fine. I can when those people threaten what's mine. His voice hardened. And I won't apologize for it. Not to you, not to anyone. Antonio Calabrese made his choice when he decided to finish what his father started. Now he's dead, and we get to live. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the conflict in her eyes. The woman she'd been before all this, the woman who volunteered at shelters and believed in second chances, was warring with the reality of the world they lived in. A world where mercy was weakness and hesitation got you killed. Finally, she sagged against him. I should hate you for this, she whispered. I should be horrified. But you're not. No, I'm so tired of being scared. And if him being dead means I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore, if it means our baby gets to grow up without that shadow hanging over them, then, she looked up at him, then I'm grateful, even if that makes me a terrible person. It makes you a survivor. He kissed her forehead. And it makes you mine. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other while the city sprawled below them. Dante felt something shift in his chest, a weight lifting that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. For 2 years, he'd lived with the ghost of their marriage, convinced she'd betrayed him. Now he knew the truth, and the truth meant they had a chance to start over. I need to tell you something, Lena said softly, about why I really came to Bella Vista that night. You needed the job. No, yes, I did, but that's not why I was there. She pulled back to look at him. I knew you had a meeting there. Tommy mentioned it once, months ago, before everything fell apart. And I thought if I could just see you one more time from a distance, I could convince myself that you were okay, that leaving you had been worth it because you were still alive and successful. You came there to see me. I came there because I was desperate and lonely and so tired of pretending I didn't still love you. She laughed wetly. And then I dropped that tray and ruined everything. Or maybe saved everything. I still can't tell which. Saved, Dante said firmly. Definitely saved. How can you be so sure? Because if you hadn't dropped that tray, I never would have known the truth. I would have gone on thinking you'd betrayed me. And you would have kept suffering alone, trying to protect me from a threat I could have ended months ago if I'd known about it. He touched her belly, felt their child move beneath his palm. This way we get a second chance. We get to be a family. What if I don't know how to do this anymore? What if too much has happened and we can't go back to what we were? We can't go back, but we can go forward. He covered her hand with his. We can build something new, something stronger, because we'll both know exactly what we're fighting for. A family. A family, he agreed, and a life where you never have to be afraid again. She was quiet for a moment, then, what happens now? With your business? With the people who'll ask questions about Antonio? I handle it. That's what I do. He guided her to the couch, sat beside her. But I'm also going to make some changes. Step back from some of the more dangerous operations. Bring in people I trust to manage the day-to-day. Because being a father means being alive to raise my child, and I won't risk that for anything. You'd really do that? Change your whole life? I'd do anything for you, for our baby. He pulled her close. These past 2 years without you. I built an empire, made more money than we could spend in 3 lifetimes, expanded my territory across half the eastern seaboard, and none of it mattered. None of it filled the hole you left when you walked away. I never wanted to leave. I know that now. He kissed her temple. And I promise you, Lena, no one will ever make you feel like you have to choose between protecting me and being with me. Not again. Not ever. A sharp gasp cut through the moment. Lena's hand flew to her belly, her face contorting. What's wrong? Dante was on his feet instantly. Contraction. A real one. She breathed through it, her knuckles white where they gripped the couch. Stronger than before. How far apart? I haven't been timing them. Fear crept into her voice. Dante, I'm only 32 weeks. It's too early. We're going to the hospital. But no arguments. Antonio's dead. There's no one left to threaten you, no reason to hide. He was already pulling out his phone, calling Marcus. We're going now, and we're making sure you and the baby are okay. Another contraction hit before Marcus could answer. Lena cried out, doubling over. Dante caught her, his heart hammering against his ribs. How close was that to the last one? He demanded. Maybe 5 minutes. Oh God, Dante, something's wrong. This doesn't feel like Braxton Hicks anymore. Marcus picked up. Boss? Hospital, now, fastest route. Dante was already moving, carrying Lena toward the elevator. Call ahead to Mount Sinai, tell them we're coming and we need their best OB team ready. On it. The elevator ride down felt like an eternity. Lena was trying to breathe through the contractions, but Dante could see the fear in her eyes, could feel how her whole body was tensing with pain. Stay with me, he told her. Just keep breathing. We're almost there. I can't lose this baby. Tears streaked down her face. After everything we've been through, after everything I've sacrificed, I can't lose them now. You won't. I won't let you. He carried her out of the elevator, through the garage to where Marcus had the car running. We're going to get you the best care money can buy, and our baby is going to be fine. But as he settled into the back seat with Lena in his arms, as Marcus tore through traffic toward the hospital, Dante felt fear like he'd never experienced. Not in firefights, not in boardroom battles, not even when staring down the barrel of a rival's gun. This was different. This was the woman he loved and the child he'd already sworn to protect, both hanging in a balance he couldn't control. The city blurred past. Lena's contractions were getting closer together. 4 minutes, then 3. By the time they screeched to a stop at the emergency entrance, she was barely conscious, her body racked with pain. Medical staff descended on them immediately. Someone thrust a wheelchair at Dante, but he ignored it, carrying Lena straight through the doors. 32 weeks pregnant, he told the nearest doctor. Contractions every 2 to 3 minutes. High-risk pregnancy. They wheeled a gurney over. Dante laid Lena down gently, but she grabbed his hand, her grip desperate. Don't leave me, she begged. Never. He walked alongside the gurney as they rushed her toward the maternity ward. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. The next hours dissolved into a nightmare of medical terminology and harsh fluorescent lights. Lena's blood pressure was dangerously high. The baby was showing signs of distress. They talked about emergency C-sections and NICU stays and complications that made Dante's blood run cold. But through it all, he stayed by her side, held her hand, whispered promises that everything would be okay even when he didn't believe it himself. At some point, Tommy showed up. Then Maria. They sat in the waiting room, a strange family bound by loyalty and love, waiting for news that would change everything. Mr. Russo. Dante looked up to find a doctor in scrubs standing in the doorway. The woman's expression was carefully neutral, the kind of face medical professionals wore when they had to deliver news that could go either way. Your wife is in active labor, the doctor said. We've tried to stop it, but the baby's determined to come. We're prepping for an emergency C-section to minimize trauma. It's going to be risky at 32 weeks, but we have an excellent NICU team standing by. Can I be with her? During the surgery? No, but you can see her now before we take her in. Dante didn't wait for permission. He followed the doctor down the hall to Lena's room, found her looking small and frightened in the hospital bed, monitors beeping around her. Hey, he said softly, taking her hand. I'm scared. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know, me too. He kissed her knuckles. But we're going to get through this. You're going to get through this. And in a few hours, we're going to meet our baby. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll handle it, together. He touched her face. I love you, Lena. I never stopped loving you. And whatever happens in that operating room, that's not going to change. I love you too. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm sorry I stayed away so long. Sorry I wasted 2 years we could have spent together. You didn't waste anything. You survived. You protected our child. And you came back to me when it mattered most. He leaned down, kissed her gently. That's all that counts. The medical team arrived to take her to surgery. Dante watched them wheel her away, watched the doors close between them, and felt his heart go with her. Tommy appeared at his elbow. She's strong. She'll make it through. She has to. Dante's voice was raw. I just got her back. I can't lose her now. You won't. But Tommy's confidence felt hollow. Because for all of Dante's power, all his money and influence and connections, none of it meant anything in this moment. He couldn't control what happened in that operating room, couldn't threaten or bribe or manipulate his way to a happy ending. All he could do was wait, and pray to any god that might be listening that both Lena and their baby would survive. The waiting room clock ticked forward with agonizing slowness. Dante sat with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring at the sterile white floor tiles. Tommy had brought coffee an hour ago, but it sat untouched and cold on the table beside him. Maria murmured prayers in Spanish, her rosary beads clicking softly between her fingers. The sound should have been comforting. Instead, it reminded Dante of funerals and last rites, and all the ways this night could end in loss. 2 hours had passed since they'd taken Lena into surgery. 2 hours of silence broken only by the occasional page over the intercom, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the muted conversations of other families waiting for their own miracles or tragedies. Dante had faced down armed men without flinching, had made decisions that determined whether people lived or died, had built an empire on the principle that fear was weakness and emotion was a liability. But sitting in this waiting room, powerless to help the woman he loved or the child he'd never met, he understood for the first time what true helplessness felt like. "Mr. Russo?" He was on his feet before the doctor finished saying his name. The surgeon who'd spoken to him earlier stood in the doorway, still in her scrubs, her mask pulled down. Her expression was exhausted, but not devastated, and Dante seized onto that tiny detail like a lifeline. "Your wife is out of surgery, doctor," Patterson said. "She lost a significant amount of blood, and we had some complications during delivery, but she's stable now. Sedated, but stable." Relief hit him so hard his knees nearly buckled. "And the baby?" "Your son is in the NICU. He's small, just under 4 pounds, and his lungs aren't fully developed, so he's on a ventilator. The next 48 hours are critical, but our neonatal team is excellent. He's fighting." A son. Dante had a son. The reality of it slammed into him with the force of a freight train. He had a son, a tiny, premature fighter struggling for every breath in a plastic incubator. A child who existed because of love and sacrifice and the stubborn refusal of 2 people to let fear win. "Can I see them?" His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "Your wife needs rest, but you can sit with her for a few minutes. As for your son," Dr. Patterson's expression softened. "The NICU has strict protocols, but I'll have a nurse take you up. You can see him through the observation window, and once he's stabilized, you'll be able to touch him through the isolette ports." Touch him. The idea seemed impossibly fragile, touching something so small and vulnerable through holes in a plastic box. But it was more than he'd dared hope for an hour ago. "Thank you," he managed. Dr. Patterson nodded. "A nurse will be out shortly to take you to recovery. Congratulations, Mr. Russo. You're a father." She left. Dante turned to find Tommy grinning and Maria crying happy tears. They pulled him into embraces that felt surreal, celebrating a life he could barely comprehend. "A son," Tommy said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Boss, you've got a son." "Yeah." Dante couldn't stop the smile spreading across his face despite the fear still clawing at his chest. "Yeah, I do." The nurse who came to get him was young, efficient, with kind eyes that had seen too many worried fathers in too many waiting rooms. She led him through a maze of corridors to the recovery area, where Lena lay in a bed surrounded by monitors and IV drips. She looked so pale against the white sheets, her hair spread across the pillow like dark water. But her chest rose and fell with steady breaths, and when Dante took her hand, her fingers twitched in response. "She did beautifully," the nurse said softly. "Lost a lot of blood, but she's a fighter. Doctor says she should wake up in the next few hours." Dante nodded, unable to take his eyes off Lena's face. She'd been through hell for 2 years, had endured poverty and fear and loneliness, all to protect him. And now she'd given him the greatest gift he'd ever received. A son. A second chance. A future worth fighting for. He leaned down, pressed his lips to her forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything. For surviving. For coming back. For giving me this." She didn't respond, lost in whatever dreams the anesthesia brought. But Dante stayed beside her anyway, holding her hand, silently promising that he'd spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted choosing to trust him again. After 20 minutes, a different nurse appeared to take him to the NICU. The walk felt longer than it was, each step carrying him closer to a reality he still couldn't quite grasp. The neonatal intensive care unit was a world unto itself, hushed and temperature-controlled, filled with the soft beeps of monitors and the whisper of ventilators keeping tiny lives tethered to the world. The nurse stopped at an observation window. There, third isolette from the left. Dante looked through the glass and felt his heart stop. His son was impossibly small, barely bigger than his own 2 hands, with translucent skin and a tangle of wires connecting him to machines that beeped and hummed. A ventilator tube taped to his face, an IV in his tiny hand. And despite all of it, despite being born too early into a world that was too harsh and too bright, the baby was fighting. "He's strong," the nurse said, "stronger than most preemies we see at 32 weeks. Got his father's determination, I'd say." "He got his mother's strength," Dante corrected, his voice thick. Is there any way I can be closer?" "Follow me." She led him through a door that required special clearance into the NICU proper, where the isolettes sat in rows like fragile spaceships. A NICU nurse looked up as they approached, gave him a gentle smile. "You must be Dad," she said. "I'm Angela. I'll be taking care of your son for the next 12 hours. Will he be okay?" "Too early to make promises, but his vitals are good. Heart rate strong. Oxygen saturation is acceptable with the ventilator support. We're monitoring for infection and brain bleeds, but so far he's doing exactly what we want to see." Angela gestured to the isolette. "You can touch him through the ports, just wash your hands first." Dante scrubbed his hands at the sink until they were red, then returned to the isolette. The baby's heart rate steadied on the monitor, his tiny fingers flexed. "He knows you're here," Angela said softly. "They always know." Tears Dante didn't know he was capable of producing streaked down his face. He stood there with his finger on his son's chest, feeling each tiny heartbeat, and something fundamental shifted in his soul. This was what mattered. Not power or territory or revenge. This tiny life fighting to survive. This fragile miracle that existed because love had been stronger than fear. "Hey, little fighter," Dante whispered. "It's your dad. I know the world's pretty scary right now, but you're going to be okay. Your mom's okay. And I'm here. I'm always going to be here." His voice broke. "You just keep fighting, all right? Keep breathing, keep holding on. And when you're ready, when you're strong enough, we're going to take you home." The baby's fingers wrapped around Dante's pinky. A grip so weak it was barely there, but present enough to shatter what was left of Dante's composure. "He's got quite a hold," Angela said with a smile. "That's a good sign. Shows neurological development is on track." Dante stayed there for an hour, his finger trapped in his son's grip, whispering promises and stories about the life they'd build together. He told the baby about his mother, about how brave she'd been, how much she loved him already. He promised him safety and security and a childhood free from the violence that had defined Dante's own. When he finally pulled away, it was only because a doctor needed to run tests. He returned to Lena's recovery room to find her stirring, her eyes fluttering open. "Dante?" Her voice was hoarse, confused. "I'm here." He was at her side instantly, taking her hand. "I'm right here." "The baby." Panic flooded her face. He's alive. He's in the NICU, and he's fighting. 4 pounds, strong heartbeat, and the most determined little fighter I've ever seen." Dante smiled through his tears. "He's perfect, Lena. Our son is perfect." The relief that washed over her face was transcendent. "A boy?" "A boy. With your eyes, I think. Hard to tell with all the equipment, but I swear he has your eyes." She started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Dante climbed carefully onto the bed beside her, gathered her into his arms as gently as he could manage, given her incision. "We did it," she whispered. "He's really here. He's really alive." "You did it. You kept him safe all those months. You survived when anyone else would have broken." He kissed her temple. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." They held each other while the machines beeped around them, Two people who'd been torn apart by fear and lies, now reunited by the tiny life they'd created together. Eventually, Lena's tears slowed. She pulled back, studying Dante's face. "What happens now?" she asked. "With Antonio gone, with everything that's happened, what comes next?" "Now we focus on getting you healthy and bringing our son home. Everything else can wait." "But your business can survive without me for a while. I've already made calls. Tommy's handling day-to-day operations. The legitimate businesses run themselves. And as for the rest," he touched her face, "I meant what I said about stepping back, making changes. Our son didn't fight this hard to survive just to grow up without a father." "You'd really walk away from all of it?" "Not walk away. Transform it." The idea had been forming in his mind for hours, crystallizing into something that felt right. "I've spent 20 years building power through fear. Maybe it's time to build something else, something legitimate that our son can be proud of." Lena searched his eyes. "What are you thinking?" "That restaurant where I found you, Bella Vista. I bought it this morning, before everything went down with Antonio. I was thinking—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I was thinking about what you said once, about wanting to help people, about the shelter where you volunteered. What if we transformed Bella Vista into something more? A training program for people who need second chances. Single mothers, ex-cons trying to go straight, anyone struggling to get back on their feet. We teach them real skills, pay them real wages, help them build real futures." Her eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "I'd do anything to make sure our son grows up knowing his father is more than just the sum of his violence." He meant every word. "Antonio's dead. The Calabrese organization is going to tear itself apart, fighting over the scraps. And I'm done letting dead men dictate my future. It's time to build something worth protecting." "It's a beautiful idea," Lena said softly. "But the other families won't just let you walk away from the life. You know too much, control too much territory." "I'm not walking away, I'm evolving. There's a difference." He'd thought this through during the long hours of waiting. "I'll maintain enough presence to stay relevant, to keep the protection we need. But the violence, the constant war for territory, that ends. I've got enough money to last 3 lifetimes. It's time to start using it for something other than buying power. What about the people who won't accept that? Who'll see it as weakness? Let them try me." The steel in his voice made it clear he wasn't abandoning his edge entirely. "I'm choosing a different path, not becoming soft. Anyone who mistakes that for weakness will learn otherwise." A nurse appeared to check Lena's vitals. While the woman worked, Dante's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "News is out about Antonio. His lieutenants are already fighting over territory. You were right. They're tearing each other apart." Another problem solving itself. Dante pocketed his phone without responding. Over the next 2 days, a routine established itself. Dante split his time between Lena's room and the NICU, watching his son grow stronger by increments that seemed impossibly small but meant everything. The baby came off the ventilator on the second day, breathing on his own with just a nasal cannula for support. His weight stabilized. His color improved. And with each tiny victory, the fear that had gripped Dante's chest began to ease. Lena healed faster than expected, her body proving as resilient as her spirit. By the 3rd day, she was able to walk to the NICU, to stand beside the isolette and place her own hands through the ports to touch their son. "We need to name him," she said, her finger tracing the baby's impossibly tiny hand. "He can't be baby boy Russo forever." They'd discussed names before, in what felt like another lifetime. But those conversations had been theoretical, distant. This was real. "What about Marco?" Dante suggested. "After your father." Lena's eyes filled with tears. Her father had died when she was 17, and she still missed him fiercely. "Marco Vincent Russo," she said softly, testing the sound. "Vincent for survival," Dante interrupted, understanding. "Not for Calabrese. For the strength it took to survive what he put us through." She nodded. "Marco Vincent Russo. Our little fighter." "Our little fighter," Dante agreed. Angela, who'd been hovering discreetly nearby, smiled. "Marco. That's a strong name for a strong boy." The following week brought more progress. Marco's lung function improved enough that they removed the nasal cannula. He started taking tiny amounts of milk through a feeding tube. His weight crept upward. The doctors began talking about discharge timelines, not immediately, but eventually. Hope became something tangible instead of desperate. During one of Marco's checkups, Dante pulled Tommy aside in the hallway. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "Name it." "The people at that shelter where Lena volunteered, the one where Sarah Martinez worked. I want you to find out who's running it now, what they need, funding, resources, whatever." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "You planning to make a donation?" "I'm planning to make sure what happened to Sarah never happens to anyone else there. Set up a fund, something substantial, enough to provide security, legal services, housing assistance, everything those women need to actually escape dangerous situations." Dante's jaw tightened. "And it's going to be anonymous. No press, no credit, nothing that ties back to us. Just help that actually helps." "Consider it done." Tommy studied him. "You're really serious about this new direction." "I have a son now. That changes everything." "Yeah." Tommy's expression softened. "Yeah, it does." 2 weeks after Marco's birth, Lena was discharged from the hospital. Dante brought her home to the penthouse, where Maria had prepared everything. A nursery painted in soft blues and grays, a rocking chair by the window, shelves waiting for books and toys, and all the normal things normal families accumulated. "It's beautiful," Lena breathed, standing in the doorway. "It's waiting for him," Dante corrected, "for when he's strong enough to come home." That night, they lay in bed together for the first time in over 2 years. Not making love, Lena was still healing, but simply holding each other in the darkness, talking about the future in whispers. "I'm scared," Lena admitted, "that something will go wrong, that we'll get him home and I won't know what to do." "We'll figure it out together." Dante pulled her closer. "That's what parents do. They figure it out as they go." "What if I'm not good at it? What if you survived 2 years of hell to protect him before he was even born? You're going to be an amazing mother." He kissed her forehead. "And I'm going to be there for every moment, every feeding, every diaper change, every sleepless night. You're not doing this alone." "Promise?" "Promise." 3 weeks after Marco's birth, the doctors finally gave the word they'd been waiting for. He was ready to go home. Dante and Lena arrived at the hospital with the car seat they'd practiced installing a dozen times, with blankets and tiny clothes and hearts full of terrified hope. Angela helped them prepare Marco for discharge, showing them how to bundle him properly, how to support his head, how to read his cues. "He's going to do great," she assured them as Lena held Marco for the first time without wires and tubes between them. "You've got my number if you have questions, and the pediatrician's office is expecting your call. But honestly, you two have been amazing parents already. Trust your instincts." The car ride home was the longest 15 minutes of Dante's life. He drove like he was transporting nitroglycerin, hyper-aware of every bump and turn. Lena sat in the back beside Marco's car seat, her hand resting on his tiny chest, monitoring every breath. When they finally made it to the penthouse, Maria was waiting with tears streaming down her face. She cooed over Marco in rapid Spanish, blessing him and kissing his forehead and declaring him the most beautiful baby she'd ever seen. That first night home was chaos. Marco woke every 2 hours, demanding food and comfort and reassurance that he wasn't back in the bright, loud NICU. Dante and Lena took turns walking him around the apartment, whispering stories and songs, learning the language of his cries. At 4 in the morning, Dante stood by the nursery window with Marco against his chest, looking out at the city he'd spent so long conquering. It looked different now. Less like a battlefield and more like a place where his son would grow up, go to school, make friends, live a life that had nothing to do with violence or fear. "You're going to have everything I didn't," Dante told the sleeping baby. "Safety, stability, parents who are actually present. And you're never going to know what it feels like to be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect you." Marco made a small sound in his sleep, his tiny fist curling against Dante's shirt. And in that moment, Dante understood what people meant when they talked about unconditional love. This child owned him completely, would own him for the rest of his life, and he'd never been happier to surrender control. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Lena healed, her body and spirit growing stronger as the fear that had defined her life for 2 years finally released its grip. Dante divided his time between family and business, but the balance had shifted fundamentally. Calls that used to demand immediate attention could wait until after Marco's bedtime. Meetings that used to run for hours were shortened or delegated. Tommy handled it all with surprising grace, stepping up to manage operations that Dante had always micromanaged before. The business didn't collapse without Dante's constant oversight. If anything, it ran smoother, as lieutenants who'd been waiting for opportunities finally got the chance to prove themselves. 6 weeks after Marco came home, Dante stood in what used to be Bella Vista and surveyed the renovations. The restaurant had been gutted and reimagined, still elegant but warmer now, welcoming instead of intimidating. The kitchen had been expanded to accommodate the training program. Offices in the back would house counselors and job placement specialists. Lena walked through the space beside him, Marco strapped to her chest in a carrier. She'd been integral in the planning, her experience with the shelter informing every decision. "It's perfect," she said, touching the wall where they'd hung a plaque. It read, "In memory of Sarah Martinez and her daughter Elena. May their light continue to guide others home." "You're sure about the name?" Dante asked. They debated for weeks about what to call the new venture. Lena had finally suggested something that felt right. "Elena's Table," she confirmed. "A place where everyone has a seat, where no one is turned away, where second chances are the first thing on the menu." "Elena's Table it is." The grand opening 3 months later brought a crowd that mixed Dante's old world with his new one. Business associates who'd never imagined him doing anything charitable stood alongside social workers and community organizers. Tommy gave a speech about investing in the future. Lena cut the ribbon with Marco in her arms, her smile genuine for the first time in years. Dante watched from the side, taking in the scene. This was power too, just a different kind. The power to transform suffering into hope, to take the worst thing that had ever happened to them and turn it into something that would help hundreds of others. "Not bad for a reformed crime boss," Tommy said, appearing at his elbow with champagne. "I'm not reformed, just focused differently." Dante accepted the glass. "How's the transition going?" "Smooth. Most of the families have accepted the new arrangement. You maintain your territory but stop actively expanding, and in return, they leave you alone to play philanthropist." Tommy sipped his drink. "There are rumors, of course. People wondering if you've gone soft." "Let them wonder. Anyone stupid enough to test the theory will learn otherwise." "That's what I told them." Tommy grinned. "So what's next? You've got the restaurant program, the shelter funding. What other good deeds are you planning?" "Lena wants to start a scholarship fund. For kids whose parents are incarcerated, help them break the cycle." Dante watched his wife across the room, saw her laughing at something one of the new trainees had said. "And I'm thinking about that building in Queens where she was living when I found her, buying it, renovating it into proper affordable housing, making sure no one else has to live in those conditions. You're really going all in on this." "I have a son now. I want him to grow up knowing his father built things instead of just destroying them." Dante finished his champagne. "There's enough darkness in this world. Maybe it's time I contributed some light." The months turned into a year. Marco grew from a fragile preemie into a robust toddler with his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn determination. He took his first steps in the penthouse living room, with both parents cheering him on, spoke his first word, "Mama," and made Lena cry happy tears. Developed a personality that was equal parts sweet and fierce, charming everyone he met while refusing to be pushed around. Elena's Table flourished. Dozens of people cycled through the training program, learning skills that led to real jobs and real futures. The success stories mounted. Single mothers who'd been homeless finding stable employment, ex-cons staying clean and employed, teenagers aging out of foster care building careers instead of falling through the cracks. Lena threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd once applied to surviving. She was there almost every day, working with trainees, connecting people to resources, being the kind of support system she desperately needed during her own darkest times. On Marco's first birthday, they held a small party at the penthouse. Nothing extravagant, just Maria, Tommy, a few close friends, and a cake shaped like a lion that Marco destroyed with gleeful enthusiasm. Later, after everyone had left and Marco was asleep, Dante and Lena sat on the couch with glasses of wine and the comfortable silence of people who'd been through war together and come out the other side. "Do you ever regret it?" Lena asked quietly, "leaving that life behind?" "I didn't leave it behind. I transformed it." Dante considered the question seriously. "But no, I don't regret it. How could I, when it gave me this?" "This?" "You, Marco. A life that means something beyond power and territory." He pulled her close. "I spent 20 years building an empire on fear. But this past year, building something based on hope, it's been the most satisfying thing I've ever done." "Even more satisfying than that deal with Viktor Kozlov that you walked away from?" Dante laughed. "Viktor's empire collapsed 6 months after we were supposed to sign. Turns out he was overextended and desperate for my resources to prop up his failing operations. Walking away from that deal was the best business decision I ever made." "You always did have good instincts." "My instincts told me to fight for you when everyone else said to let you go. That's the only instinct that really mattered." He touched her face. "I love you, Lena. More now than I did when we got married the first time." "The first time?" She raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning a second wedding?" "Actually," he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. "I was thinking we could do it right this time. No secrets, no fear, just two people who've been through hell choosing each other anyway." Lena opened the box to find a simple band, white gold, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious diamond he'd given her the first time. This was better, meaningful instead of expensive. "Dante Russo, are you proposing to your own wife?" "Ex-wife, technically. The divorce went through 18 months ago." He took the ring from the box, held it up. "So yes, I'm proposing. Lena Hale. Will you marry me again? Will you build this life with me, raise our son together, and tolerate my stubborn ass for the next 50 years? She was crying and laughing at the same time. "You're ridiculous." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes." She held out her hand, let him slide the ring onto her finger. "Yes, I'll marry you again. Yes to all of it." They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at Elena's table, surrounded by the people who'd helped them survive and rebuild. Marco toddled down the aisle ahead of his mother, his little suit perfectly tailored, his grin infectious. Maria cried through the entire ceremony. Tommy served as best man and made a speech about second chances that had everyone reaching for tissues. And when Dante kissed his bride, his wife, again and for always, he felt the weight of the past 2 years finally lift. They'd survived. They'd fought. They'd transformed pain into purpose and fear into love. 5 years later, Dante stood in the same spot where he'd first seen Lena collapse under the weight of that tray, and marveled at how completely everything had changed. Elena's table had expanded into 3 locations across the city. The scholarship fund had sent 47 kids to college. The affordable housing project in Queens had become a model for similar initiatives in other cities. And Marco was 5 now, starting kindergarten in the fall, full of questions and energy and a confidence that came from growing up loved and safe. He knew nothing about the violence that had defined his parents' past. Knew nothing about the Calabreses or the threats or the 2 years his mother had spent in hiding. He just knew that his father ran restaurants that helped people, that his mother worked with families who needed support, and that he was loved beyond measure. "Daddy, look!" Marco ran up with a drawing he'd made. Stick figures labeled Mama, Daddy, and Marco, standing in front of a building with a sign that read Lena's Table. "It's Elena's table, buddy," Dante corrected gently. "I know, but I like Mama better than Elena." Marco studied his artwork seriously. "Can we hang it in your office?" "Absolutely. Front and center." Lena joined them, sliding her arm around Dante's waist. "Ready to go? We're going to be late for the ribbon cutting." They were opening a 4th location today, this one specifically focused on housing assistance for domestic violence survivors. Lena had poured her heart into the planning, determined that what had happened to Sarah Martinez would never happen to anyone else if she could prevent it. As they walked toward the car, Dante carrying Marco on his shoulders, Lena's hand in his, Dante thought about that night in the warehouse when he'd pulled the trigger on Antonio Calabrese. He'd killed a man to protect his family, and he didn't regret it. Would never regret it. Some acts of violence were necessary to create peace, but what came after, the choice to build instead of destroy, to create opportunity instead of fear, that was the legacy he wanted to leave. Not as a crime boss who'd controlled half the city through terror, but as a man who'd chosen love over power and never looked back. "What are you thinking about?" Lena asked as they drove through the city. "About how far we've come, about how close we came to losing everything." He glanced in the rearview mirror at Marco, who was singing to himself in the back seat. "About how grateful I am that you dropped that tray." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "Best accident I ever had. Best moment of my life." He caught her hand, brought it to his lips. "Everything that matters started that night." "Everything that matters is right here," Lena corrected, squeezing his hand. "And it's going to stay right here. No more running, no more hiding. Just us, building the life we always deserved." "Just us," Dante agreed. And as they pulled up to the new location of Elena's table, where dozens of people waited to celebrate another victory of hope over fear, Dante Russo, former crime boss, current philanthropist, full-time father, and husband, smiled at the future he'd chosen. It was messy and complicated and nothing like the empire he'd once built. But it was real. It was meaningful. And it was his. The feared Mafia boss had become something far more powerful. A man who'd learned that real strength wasn't found in making people fear you, but in giving them reasons to hope. And in the end, that made all the difference.